time. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but we've had a good day today, and I hope you have as well. Today we're talking about a new product that we have at Daily Manufacturing. It's a new probiotic. We're calling it ColonActives. It's a advanced gut microbiome symbiotic support, actually. Symbiotic means it's both probiotic and prebiotic. And we'd like to tell you a little bit about it and about probiotics and colon health and gut health today. First of all, the two delayed release capsules, and let me explain delayed release capsules, the DR caps. They are capsules that do not dissolve in the stomach. They're acid resistant, so they have to get past the stomach to a more neutral pH, which you find in the small intestine, before they dissolve. And that gives some protection to the bacteria. Having them in the DR caps is equivalent to having an even stronger probiotic than what we have. Now, the DR caps in this are something that we've been using in any product pretty much as a probiotic anymore, and a few other products that we feel like might be damaged by gastric acid. Many things are not. But in each capsule we have 1 billion, no, in each two capsules we have 1 billion Lactobacillus acidophilus, 1 billion Lactobacillus plantarum, 1 billion Bifidobacterium bifidus, 500 million or half a billion Bifidobacterium lactis, the same for Bifidobacterium longum, Gasseri, and Raminosus. So we have a total of 500 billion live bacteria in each dose of 2 capsules. And actually, that's, in my opinion, a fairly high dose. And I would suggest not taking it all at once, but taking, one in the morning and one. Okay, we just lost sound briefly. I'm dubbing back in, so my voice will not match. I did make an error, though. I said 500 billion bacteria. It's 5 billion bacteria per dosage, and that's 2 capsule dosage. Now, these bacteria are very good. They're bacteria that normally live in a healthy intestine. Lactobacillus acidophilus, I consider the most important one for the small intestine, and Bifidobacterium bifidus, the most important one for the large intestine. Lactobacillus plantarum, I would call it the, quote, obesity bacteria. It is really good for metabolism. It's actually found in a lot of fermented foods like kimchi, the Korean fermented food that you probably know about. Excellent bacteria. This whole formula really is good for metabolism and for maintaining proper metabolism of nutrients like glucose, fats, and others. It's also very good for maintaining body weight. Now, you're not going to take this and suddenly start losing weight, but it will help you develop an enterotype that will help you to maintain adequate, or actually excellent, metabolic control of your body. And I think that just taking it, like I said, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, will be a great way to use this product for almost everybody. In fact, that's what I do. I use this product every morning, and then I take it again in the evening when I get home. So I think it's a wonderful product, and I hope you will like it too. On and look at some of these bacteria in general. Now, why do we take probiotics to start with? Well, you see this illustration here that I have, and it shows that on the left a couple of friendly bacteria, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, that we consider often good bacteria, and unfriendly bacteria, the H. pylori, Salmonella species, that we consider bad bacteria. We have to be a little bit careful here, though. I really don't like the concept of good and bad bacteria. I like more a concept of more of what we want to get and less of what we want, because it's looking more and more like even the ones that we consider bad bacteria actually have uses in the body. It's kind of like I would say with certain minerals. You know, one of the most toxic minerals out there is selenium, but selenium is something we absolutely need too. So we have to be very careful that we don't get too much selenium. There are regions in China where people have selenium poisoning because of the food they eat. The selenium is so rich in the soil. And other areas in the same country where there's so little selenium in the soil that they have selenium deficiencies. And too much and too little is bad either way. And that's the same thing for some of these bacteria. We know, for instance, that not having any H. pylori at all, and this is Dr. Blazer has done that research, Martin Blazer, no H. pylori at all can actually cause problems itself. On the other hand, we know that most of your gastric ulcers are caused by overgrowth of H. pylori. And the treatment is usually to give strong antibiotics and just wipe them out completely. And that's not really always good. In fact, it's not good. You want them under control. And that's probably true of most of what we consider bad bacteria. There may be a few that are just, you know, nasty creatures that shouldn't be there, period. But most of them are not in that category. So we really want to keep them under control, and that's what the, quote, good bacteria, or some of the ones that we want a little bit more of, actually do. One of the things. So many of these bacteria, in fact, probably most of the ones that we take as probiotics, actually produce bacteriocins and other things that can either inhibit the growth or actually kill other bacteria. Usually, if the ones that we like, will get rid of what we consider usually bad bacteria, but it won't do it as completely as a strong dose of antibiotics. In fact, some of these bacteriocins are being studied as potential drugs to be very specific antibiotics that only target certain bacteria to be used medically as drugs. And we don't know, I don't know that there are any that have actually reached drug approval stage yet. But that's something that is being looked at, and it seems like a good idea to me. Sometimes things that seem like good ideas turn out not to be. But we need to be careful about what we eliminate when we start really going after bacteria in the gut and in the body, because we know that antibiotics cause a lot of problems. It's probably the single biggest destroyer of gut bacteria, and it's not a good thing. And sometimes it can wipe out an entire population of all the bacteria of a single species or strain, and it's hard to get that back sometimes. Now, let's talk a little bit about the journey of bacteria through the human body. We can look at the picture here, and first of all, the bacteria has to enter the mouth. Almost all the bacteria we get into our intestinal tract actually enter the mouth first. So they had to enter through the mouth and somehow survive, at least in small numbers, until they get to a friendly place where they can live. And it's not a friendly trip for most of these bacteria. The mouth has enzymes and immune cells that can destroy them. Then people get antibacterial mouthwashes and things like that, and get more of them. So, you know, I'm not saying it kills a lot of them. It will certainly inhibit the growth of others. So that's a very unfriendly environment, and, you know, by intention probably. I think our Maker made us that way because it gets rid of a lot of the bad things that may be coming in as well. But only a handful, very small, really need to get through that environment. And keep in mind that pretty much all the bacteria in our intestinal tract had to go through this process to get there. So some do get through, even without being in our DR caps. But once they get past that, then they go into the small intestine, which isn't much more friendly, actually. And the first part of the small intestine is still pretty acidic. But you also have bile acids and pancreatic enzymes being released into there, and those things can do a number on these bacteria too. So the very few bacteria actually live, compared to the large intestine, very few actually live in the small intestine for a long period of time either. Then when they finally get to the colon, they have a friendly environment they can live and thrive in, except they have to fight with all these other bacteria. They have to compete for food. They have other bacteria making these bacteriocins that either inhibit their reproduction or kill them. So even that they're not home free completely. But at least they are in an environment where they can live, and if food gets through to them, often thrive. Now, what are some of the benefits of having, quote, beneficial bacteria in the gut? Well, we'll think about that for a minute. First of all, competitive exclusion of pathogens. They don't give up their space easily to the bad bacteria, so to speak. So they keep them in check a little bit. They also increase the growth of epithelial cells. They have growth factors that they produce, that the cells that line the intestinal tract, that helps them to grow. And that's important for maintaining a healthy gut. Many of them enhance the absorption of nutrients, especially minerals, calcium and iron in particular, and magnesium. Decreased pH in the gut deters pathogens. So that will actually, most of these bacteria we're talking about today in the ColonActive formula produce acids like lactic acid, butyric acid, acetic acid. These are metabolites that they make, and they decrease the pH some. Not nearly what the stomach is, but they decrease it. And that will deter a lot of the pathogenic bacteria and keep them kind of suppressed. Production of the short-chain fatty acids. There again, the butyric acid and those kind of things that actually provide food, energy nutrients for the intestinal macrovilli. Again, we mentioned before the production of antimicrobials, important factor for them. Modulation of the gut immune system. And the intestinal tract has a pretty robust immune system with immune cells all through the intestinal tract lining it that can produce immunoglobulin A, can send out signals through cytokines to the rest of the body, and can do a lot of things. So it's a very immune active area, and this needs to be because it's exposed to a lot of things that are not the rest of the body is not readily exposed to internally. Because if you think about the intestinal tract, a lot of physiologists consider it still the outside of the body in a way. It's traveling inside your body, but it's exposed to all kinds of things coming through, and it has to cross that barrier to get into your blood system and the rest of the body. So they kind of view your body as a long hollow tube that makes a lot of turns in there, the tube does, but food goes in one end and comes out the other. So and it makes sense to view it that way. So it needs an immune system to look out for all these things coming in from the environment, so to speak, or from what people may be putting into their mouths that they shouldn't, various things. Good bacteria reduce some of the more vigorous gas-producing bacteria that cause bloating, although they can cause it themselves. So, but some of them that are really offenders at that, they can suppress them. Enhanced digestion of proteins and carbohydrates. The bacteria can really have a real role in that. Deconjugation of bile acids, which actually ends up causing you to decrease your absorption of fat. It can reduce intrahepatic cholesterol reabsorption. So you'll notice when we're talking about some of these bacteria, they lower cholesterol, and that's probably the way most of them do it. They lower pathogen levels, as we've spoken about already, and they can reduce both constipation and diarrhea, depending on which you have and what's causing it. In the case of diarrhea, it's usually getting rid of some bad, nasty stuff that's growing in there that you need to kind of suppress a little bit. That's causing that. So there's a lot of nice things that the bacteria can do. Now, what are some of the, those are really mostly gut benefits, but what are some of the systemic benefits of these probiotics or beneficial bacteria? Well, we know that sometimes they can prevent cancer, particularly intestinal tract cancer, but more and more evidence showing that they may be able to prevent or help prevent some of the others. Weight management. Animal and human studies have shown this to some extent. Some of the animal studies are particularly interesting because they've taken lean animals and obese animals and taken fecal samples from them and injected them crossover into the other animals, and have been able to show that giving the fecal transplants from a lean rat to an obese rat will cause that obese rat to lose weight. And doing it the other way, you give obese rats fecal transplants to a lean one, that lean one will gain weight. So we know that in rats that can happen. Actually, we have one study that's has actually shown that to occur in a person. They didn't do it intentionally, but one Roman in a recent study got a fecal transplant because she had Clostridium difficile, C. diff infection that they just couldn't get rid of, and they decided to try a fecal transplant. And she was a thin woman, and the person they got the donor was a rather heavy, somewhat obese woman that they got the feces from to make a fecal transplant. And immediately afterwards, it did take care of the C. diff infection, but she immediately started gaining weight. So we know that this probably happens in people too. That was something they didn't really anticipate, although they probably should have, but because the information was there in animals. But anyway, it did happen, and something that may have been necessary to save the woman's life, but it would have been better if had not had that side effect. Obviously, these bacteria can lower cholesterol, decrease systemic inflammation, protect against diabetes, or some of the disease control things. They've also been shown to improve skin and hair appearance. And we don't know exactly how it works, but that's been shown in several models. It's very good for brain health. Actually, a lot of these bacteria will secrete neurotransmitters that send signals throughout the body. So we know there's a great, very important brain-gut axis there and interaction with the microbes. And poor gut microbiomes are linked to depression and autism. We see often sleep improvement with improved microbiome and improved immune function. I would say, though, however, that you can't say that taking a particular probiotic actually cures a disease like this. It's illegal, but it also may not be true in a lot of cases. The most important thing is to maintain a microbial diversity, lots of different microbes in the body. That's been shown consistently to be associated with better aging in people. And bacteria can multiply very quickly under favorable circumstances if they're present. So even if you don't have very many of a lot of these bacteria, if you've got some there and they're needed, the body, and usually it's the food that you get or some other signal, can cause these things to suddenly multiply well. So the most important thing is to make sure you do not, totally eliminate some of the species in the body, but they're sort of there in reserve in case you need them. Oftentimes, it's not the presence of the good bacteria that have the benefit, but the bad ones that they're kind of suppressing and keeping in check that are causing problems. So if you don't have a problem with some of the more negative type bacteria, then taking the probiotic may not be a benefit because, the way it acts is by suppressing some of these that are not so great. So keep in mind, you shouldn't take the probiotic for a specific disease and expect to see it go away. It may not do that, very likely won't. But maintaining a healthy microbiome will make you much less prone to get many of these diseases. Now let's talk just briefly about the different bacteria that we have in our ColonActive formula. Lactobacillus acidophilus, probably the best known and really the first known probiotic bacteria. A very versatile bacteria. Literally, it was named lacto after milk loving because it grows well in milk. In fact, you find it in yogurts and stuff quite a bit. Rod-shaped bacteria and bacilli sort of demonstrate is named after the rod-shaped bacteria. They're called bacilli. So Lactobacillus acidophilus and acid-loving. It really does pretty well in a fairly acid environment, and it produces a lot of lactic acid. Part of the microbiomes of the mouth, small intestine, large intestine, and vagina. So it's really scattered through the body. Not many of our probiotic bacteria can live in these kind of environments because most of them do not tolerate the presence of oxygen. But Lactobacillus acidophilus does a lot more. Many of these bacteria can't live very long in your mouth, for instance, because every time you open your mouth, air comes in and is exposed to oxygen. So they need an oxygen-free environment. Many of them do, but not the acidophilus. It can suppress harmful microorganisms like the H. pylori and the yeast Candida albicans. It can help with lactose intolerance because it can break down the lactose, actually. And that's why you remember we used to see acidophilus milk a lot. I haven't seen it as much lately, but the acidophilus in the acidophilus milk can break down that lactose, and people who are lactose intolerant can tolerate the milk. It also improves gut barrier function. In other words, it helps the leaky gut type syndrome. So a very nice thing for that. It's a wonderful bacteria. And it was in our older formula that we still have, and the major one in our ColonAid. So and ColonAid we still have right now. We'll see how it goes with ColonAid. I don't know for sure if people will just switch over entirely to ColonActives or they still want the ColonAid. People still want it, we can still make it. So we'll see how that goes. Lactobacillus plantarum. That's a nice bacteria that's found in a lot of fermented foods, actually, such as sauerkraut, if it's not pasteurized, kimchi, also if it's not pasteurized. A lot what you buy in the big grocery stores will be pasteurized, some won't. Um, the fermented olives, if they're not pasteurized. But remember, you're not going to get it if these things are pasteurized. Sauerkraut you buy in the store almost always is now. That's been heat treated. There's no live bacteria in it. But when my father-in-law years ago made his own sauerkraut, it had that live bacteria in it. It was a great food for probiotics. But like I said, what you buy in the store, not so much. It can actually produce some B vitamins in the gut, particularly folic acid. It's good for increasing the absorption of calcium and iron. It improves blood circulation in the brain and improves memory, actually, in rats. So not a bad thing there. Anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, and it improved weight loss in Russian on diets, low-calorie diets and dieters. So the Russians in this situation were on a low-calorie diet to lose weight, but they lost more weight if they were taking the Lactobacillus plantarum along with their diet. Bifidobacterium bifidus, that's the other bacteria in our ColonActive product. I still consider Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium bifidus to be the two most important bacteria to your gut. But there's others that are enormously important. And like I said, having a wide range of bacteria in gut is the main thing. The lactic acid producing bacteria, it's commonly found in yogurt and cheese. In my opinion, like I said, it's the most important bacteria for the large intestine particularly. That's where it usually colonizes and grows. It's beneficial for irritable bowel syndrome and for constipation. Been studied for those things in people. Helps relieve travelers' diarrhea. You know, if you get the bad water in some places, you get diarrhea from it. It helps prevent or alleviate that. So something to take when you're traveling to places where you may not get good quality water. It can help with, along with acidophilus, to alleviate the H. pylori infection, help suppress it. It may help with blood sugar regulation and dyslipidemia. Some evidence to suggest that. Used alone, though, it doesn't seem to help with weight loss, although some of these do. Now, Bifidobacterium lactis is found in raw milk. That's another one in the ColonActives, including in human mother's milk. It's good for oral health, not just for the gut, kind of like the acidophilus. It helps with irritable bowel syndrome and general gut health, just about any of these problems you see with gut health. It's been shown to help with, has been shown to alleviate atopic dermatitis. There's been a number of studies showing that probiotic bacteria, even though you take it internally, can help eliminate some of these skin problems, which is kind of a little bit hard to quite get your mind around, but it does it. And one of my colleagues has done some of that research, actually. Decreases total cholesterol and elevates HDL cholesterol. That's something that a lot of people are looking for. Improves blood glucose control. Helps with allergies and inflammation, and inhibits H. pylori overgrowth, which is something that we always like to see. Bacterium longum is also in this formula. It very good enhancer of immunity. It fights infections and reduces the incidence of flu. Reduces GI symptoms of celiac disease, perhaps by breaking down some of those gluten-type proteins. It's beneficial for depression and schizophrenia, which could be related to the celiac-type issue. It improves liver health, especially fatty liver. It's been shown to help reduce the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in FLD. It prevents bone loss and increases bone mineral density. It's one of the best probiotics for skin health, another one, and also combats Candida albicans infection. So there we've got a very versatile bacteria. It does a lot of great things. There again, I'm not going to say that you take it and it absolutely does that, but it can certainly set up a favorable condition in your gut and in your body to help with those issues. Lactobacillus gasseri is kind of interesting. It's been shown to prevent abdominal obesity in part by increasing fecal fat excretion. Some people refer to it as the weight loss bacteria or probiotic. It lowers blood glucose and liver cholesterol in rats. It lowers LDL and total cholesterol and triglycerides while elevating high-density lipoprotein, HCl cholesterol, HDL, not HCl. Okay, it improves glucose tolerance, and has numerous benefits in the intestinal tract. And going back to the weight loss part of it, I have at least 3 human clinical trials showing that it does have these weight loss effects in humans. And there may be more. That's what I've found so far. So that's pretty good to have 3 clinical trials in humans for one gut bacteria. Finally, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, another probiotic with clinical research showing anti-obesity effects. It helps with the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and blood sugar regulation. It helps suppress Streptococcus mutans in the mouth. That's the bacteria in your mouth that causes cavities. It helps with the expulsion of parasites in rats and has actually been shown to alleviate asthma symptoms in a mouse model of asthma. So these are some of the things that these various bacteria can do. But I want to be very careful to say that you shouldn't, take these probiotics to treat these conditions. You take the probiotics along with whatever else you need to do to treat the condition and hope that it will, set up a condition in the body, because really what it's trying to do is set up a favorable microbiome in your gut to set up a metabolically healthy gut microbiome system. And it's going to be a combination of a lot of things. Your gut has about 100 bacteria that are major ones usually in it, but thousands of them are there, at least in small amounts, and of different ones. And all of those may be important, even the ones that aren't there in very large quantities. So what we want to do is increase microbial diversity. One thing I'm really careful about with people is I'm not sure that the general wisdom of the past of taking a lot of probiotics right after you've gone on probiotic treatment is actually a good idea. For this reason, I think I'd give it a few days or a week to do that, because if you think about it, these probiotics are also antibiotics. And if you've almost wiped out a lot of bacteria in your gut from taking probiotics, but there's a little bit left, you don't want to finish them off with a probiotic that's having antibiotic effects. And I really feel like you've got to be careful with that. And there was a paper not too long ago in the last year that showed that taking probiotics after a course of antibiotics actually slowed down the recovery of the gut microbiome to where it was before the antibiotics. Now, so you've got to keep in mind that you might be taking in the case of ColonActive 7, you could be taking several others. You could be taking as many as 15 or 20 probiotics. But that's a very tiny percentage of the different ones that are in your gut. And so you're not increasing your whole gut microbiome when you do that. You're increasing one narrow spectrum of it that could have a deleterious effect on the other ones. So be careful about taking too high of doses, and be careful about taking it when you've already taken antibiotics immediately. I don't think I'd recommend that, following it up immediately after antibiotics, personally. But that's I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but that's my personal opinion at the moment based on the evidence I've seen. So why do we need probiotics to start with? And we're about finished here. Well, we know that children, by the time they get 5 years old, have a lot of gut bacteria. They've got about as many as they'll ever have. And most of them have never taken a probiotic. So why do we need it later in life? Well, there are some good reasons for that. And we don't know why, but as people age, they'll reach a peak, and then as they get older and older, they'll start dropping off in the probiotics and the good bacteria and the bacterial diversity in their guts. It begins to decrease, and that's really associated with a lot of aging problems. Well, we kill off a lot of our microbiome as we get older with antibiotics and other drugs. So that's one of the reasons why we may need probiotics, to kind of get some of these back. Many infants are delivered by C-section, and that kind of puts them at a delayed start on getting all those bacteria, although most of them will eventually recover to normal. But we do know that the microbial diversity declines with age, although we don't fully understand why. Another thing is that many foods are eaten cooked and not raw. Raw foods are actually a good source of gut bacteria. When you eat an apple, for instance, it's got roughly 100 million live bacteria that you consume eating that raw apple. If you eat applesauce that's cooked and pasteurized, you don't get any. But, and interestingly, whether you eat an organic apple or a commercially grown regular apple, you have about the same number of bacteria in it, but you have a more diverse bacteria in the organic one. Apparently some of the stuff they spray it with and stuff gets rid of some of the bacteria. So there's fewer kinds of bacteria, although the total amount's about the same. But, a lot of the bacteria that it turns out are not actually on the skin where you'd expect them, because they are washed off. But actually a lot of them get down into the apple and in the flesh of the apple. So you're eating a raw apple, you're getting those bacteria, and apparently that's a good thing. But, anytime you're eating raw foods, you're getting some bacteria. When you breathe the air, you're getting some bacteria. So, you're not going to be in a sterile environment, and you wouldn't want to be, really. In fact, we're often excessive about over-sanitizing our environments. But like I said before, the apple contains 100 million live bacteria. But what do? A lot of times, instead of eating apples, we eat applesauce, which has no bacteria. We eat cooked apples, which have no bacteria, live ones. We do that with a lot of our foods that we eat. So overcooking, overprocessing of foods really does suppress our bacterial diversity in our gut. So raw foods, I don't recommend necessarily a totally raw food diet, but eating raw, including a good diverse amount of raw foods in your diet, is going to be very beneficial to your microbiome. And as you need to, using probiotics and prebiotics, putting a lot of emphasis on getting the right foods that are high fiber, raw foods again, and sometimes not raw foods. But these kind of foods can really increase your gut microbiome and improve your health in a lot of ways. and I hope you've learned a little bit today. The ColonActive, I think, is ready. Well, you could start placing orders for it right away, I think, because it's if it's not bottled yet, it's right behind another product to be bottled very quickly. Is it bottled? Oh, it's bottled. Okay. It's just hot off the machine, but we are ready to go on that one. And another one that's come up that we're ready to go on right away is a little bit lower potency vitamin D, 800 IU vitamin D. And we're doing that specifically because there's some countries that have limits on vitamin D where that's the upper limit. The 800 IUs is. So we have made that product just, primarily for that market. But it's not available yet, but it should be in the next few days. So I'm getting waved at by people here saying, yes, you're right. Oh, it's ready too. Hot dogs. Well, they're both ready. What can I tell you? Well, 800 IU vitamin D is ready, and our ColonActive is ready. Now, if you're from another country, I've been trying to think, this time of year particularly, shipping live bacteria is a little bit tricky because some of them are fairly heat tolerant, many of them are not. We may want to take a look at how to get it to you as fast as possible. Ask us about that and discuss with us how we can get it to you, because I hate to see that on in a hot container on a ship for weeks going across the ocean. That does not sound like a good scenario for these bacteria. So we can discuss that individually if you're in that situation. If you're in the United States, we may delay shipping. For instance, if you're in California, we're not going to ship that product to you on a Thursday because we know it's going to sit in a truck all weekend out in the sun. So we'll wait till Monday, for instance. In fact, if you're in California, we probably should do all your shipments on Monday. You may get held up a week. But, and we're trying to take extra precautions in wrapping it, and depending on how far it has to go, taking extra caution with shipping, because it's a very good product and we want you to get maximum benefit out of it. So with that, we'll wrap it up. It was great talking to you today, and see you next month, and hope to have some more good information for you. Goodbye. Have a great day.